It was a regular Saturday afternoon, the sun casting a golden hue over the quiet streets as Jaden Carter pedaled his bike home. At just 16, he had already learned the value of hard work, spending his weekends stacking shelves at the local grocery store to help his mother make ends meet. Life wasn't easy in his neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, but Jaden had always carried himself with quiet determination, never hesitating to lend a hand when someone needed help. As he weaved through the city park, enjoying the crisp air, a sudden panicked scream shattered the calm. His body tensed, instinct took over. He kicked his bike into high gear, racing toward the sound. When he arrived, the scene before him was chaotic. A luxury SUV sat idling by the curb, its back door flung open. Beside it, a well-dressed woman knelt on the pavement, her hands shaking as she struggled to steady a tiny infant who was gasping for breath. Her cries were frantic, her face streaked with panic. Jaden didn't stop to think. He dropped his bike and rushed over. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling beside her. I don't know," the woman stammered, barely able to form words. She can't breathe. I don't know what to do." Jaden's pulse pounded in his ears, but his hands remained steady. He had seen this before, once on a school trip when a teacher had performed CPR on a choking student. Without hesitation, he gently took the baby from the woman's trembling hands. Carefully, he checked its airway, then leaned down and administered small, controlled breaths, his fingers pressing rhythmically against the infant's chest. A second passed, then another, and then a sound, a weak cough, a gasp, and finally a strong, wailing cry. The woman let out a sob of relief as Jaden carefully handed the baby back to her, his own breath catching in his chest. He had done it. The baby was breathing. Tears streamed down the woman's face as she cradled her child, rocking back and forth. You saved her," she whispered, her voice shaking with disbelief. She looked up at Jaden, as if seeing him for the first time. "You saved my baby." Jaden swallowed hard, glancing down at his hands, still trembling from the rush of adrenaline. He wasn't sure what to say. He had only done what he knew in his heart was right. But before he could respond, the distant wail of sirens filled the air. And in that moment, neither he nor the woman could have imagined that what had just happened would change both of their lives forever. The adrenaline was still wearing off as Jaden held the tiny infant in his arms, feeling the steady rise and fall of her fragile chest. The woman beside him, still visibly shaken, fumbled with her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911. Tears streamed down her face, but through her sobs, she kept repeating the same words. "Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you." Jaden nodded, his voice calm despite his own racing heartbeat. "She's okay now," he reassured her. "She just needed help breathing." The distant wail of sirens grew closer, and within moments, an ambulance screeched to a stop. Paramedics rushed toward them, taking the baby from Jaden's careful grasp. The woman stepped aside, watching anxiously as the medics checked her daughter's vitals. Jaden stood back, suddenly feeling the weight of what had just happened. He had just saved a baby's life. The realization hit him hard, and for a moment, he felt lightheaded. The paramedics reassured the woman, giving her a nod. "She's stable, ma'am. We'll take her to the hospital for observation, but she's going to be fine." Relief washed over her face, and for the first time since the ordeal began, she took a deep, steadying breath. As the paramedics wheeled the baby toward the ambulance, she turned to Jaden, her tear-filled eyes locking onto his. "My name is Sophia Montgomery," she said, her voice still shaky but filled with gratitude. Jaden, still trying to process everything, wiped his palms on his jeans. "I'm just glad I could help," he replied sincerely. Sophia gave him a small, almost knowing smile. "I don't think you understand," she said, studying him carefully. "You didn't just help. You saved my daughter's life." Jaden nodded. but he still didn't quite grasp why she was looking at him like that. Then, she took a deep breath and continued, her voice steady now. I'm the CEO of Montgomery Enterprises. Jaden's brow furrowed. The name sounded familiar, but it took him a second to put the pieces together. When realization finally hit him, his eyes widened. Wait, Montgomery? As in… Sophia nodded. Yes, that Montgomery. Jaden exhaled sharply, suddenly understanding. Montgomery Enterprises was one of the largest companies in the country, an empire spanning industries from real estate to tech. The woman standing in front of him wasn't just a mother. She was one of the most powerful business figures in the world. Sophia watched as the truth settled in, then placed a hand on his shoulder. I don't know how to thank you for what you did today, she said, her voice softer now. But I do know one thing, Jaden. You're a hero. He swallowed, unsure how to respond. Just an hour ago, he was a regular teenager riding home from work. Now, he was standing in front of a billionaire who was looking at him like he had just changed her entire world. The next morning, Jaden woke up to something he never expected, his phone buzzing with non-stop notifications. At first, he thought it was just another group chat blowing up, but as he rubbed his groggy eyes and looked closer, he realized something was different. His name was everywhere. Local news stations were covering the story. Social media was flooded with posts. Hashtags like #Hero Jaden and #Saved by Jaden were trending worldwide. People were calling him a hero, praising his quick thinking, and sharing clips of the dramatic rescue caught on a bystander's phone. Jaden scrolled through his messages, overwhelmed by the flood of texts. His classmates, his teachers, even distant relatives he hadn't spoken to in years were all reaching out. He even spotted messages from reporters and journalists asking for interviews. He let out a slow breath, still trying to wrap his head around how his ordinary day had turned into a viral moment. He had saved a baby, sure, but now it felt like the whole world was watching. As Jaden processed it all, his phone vibrated again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. Hesitating for a moment, he answered. Hello? A familiar, polished voice greeted him. Jaden, this is Sophia Montgomery. Jaden sat up straighter. Oh, hi, Ms. Montgomery. She chuckled. Please, call me Sophia. He could hear the warmth in her voice, but also something else, an intensity that made him focus. I wanted to thank you again, she continued. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I don't believe in coincidences. You saved my daughter's life, and I don't take that lightly. Jaden wasn't sure what to say. I'm just glad she's okay. There was a brief pause on the other end. Then, Sophia said something that made Jaden's stomach flip. I'd like to meet with you, Jaden, in person, at my home. His mind reeled. Her home? The Montgomery estate? He had seen pictures of it on the news before. A sprawling mansion with gates so high they looked like something out of a movie. People whispered about how billionaires like Sophia lived in a different world. Jaden hesitated. Are you sure? I mean, I appreciate the offer, but I don't really… I insist, Sophia interrupted gently. I have something important to discuss with you, and trust me, this is an opportunity you won't want to miss. Jaden's fingers tightened around his phone. Something about her tone told him that this wasn't just about thanking him. This was bigger. After a beat, he exhaled. Okay, when should I come? I'll send a car for you tomorrow morning, she said, her voice warm but firm. See you soon, Jaden. As the call ended, Jaden stared at his screen, his heart pounding. He had no idea how his life was about to change. Jaden sat in the grand Montgomery mansion, feeling like he had stepped into another world. The sheer luxury of the place was overwhelming. Gleaming marble floors, high ceilings adorned with chandeliers, and walls lined with artwork that probably cost more than everything in his entire neighborhood combined. He tried to stay composed as Sophia and her husband, Nathan Montgomery, led him into a sunlit sitting room that looked straight out of a magazine. They motioned for him to take a seat on an oversized leather couch, its cushions so plush that he sank in slightly. Nathan, a tall, composed man with salt and pepper hair, studied Jaden with quiet curiosity. Sophia, on the other hand, wore an expression of warmth and gratitude, her eyes shining with something deeper, something Jaden couldn't quite place. "Jaden," Sophia began, her voice steady but gentle, "I don't think you truly understand just how much you've changed our lives." Jaden shifted uncomfortably, still not used to being the center of attention. "I just did what anyone would do," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I wasn't thinking about being a hero or anything like that." Sophia exchanged a glance with Nathan, who gave her a small nod before speaking. "That's exactly why we wanted to meet with you," he said, his voice calm but deliberate. "You didn't hesitate. You acted when most people would have frozen. That's rare, Jaden. And we don't believe in ignoring rare talent." Jaden frowned slightly, not sure where this was going. "I mean, I appreciate that, but I don't really get what you're saying." Sophia leaned forward, clasping her hands together. "We want to bring you into the family business." Jaden blinked. "What?" Nathan nodded. "We've been talking, and we'd like to offer you something that could change your life. A full-paid internship at Montgomery Enterprises, where you can learn from some of the best minds in business. And more than that, we'd like to make you an advisor to our family's charity foundation." Jaden's mouth nearly fell open. "An advisor? But I'm just a kid from the city. I don't know anything about business." Sophia smiled. "That's not what matters to us. What matters is that you have something special, bravery, heart, and a desire to help others. That's exactly the kind of person we want to invest in." Jaden felt his heart racing. This was unreal. People like him didn't get opportunities like this. They worked hard, struggled to get noticed, and hoped for a break that never came. And yet, here he was, being offered a position in one of the wealthiest families in the country's empire. "But why?" he asked finally. "I mean, yeah, I saved Olivia, but I never expected anything in return." Sophia's expression softened. "And that's exactly why we want to give you this opportunity. Because you didn't do it for a reward. You did it because it was the right thing to do." Jaden sat back, his mind spinning. He had spent his whole life fighting for small wins, for chances that always seemed just out of reach. And now, in the span of 48 hours, his world had turned upside down. He exhaled slowly. "I don't know what to say." Nathan smiled. "Say yes." Jaden looked between them, feeling a weight settle in his chest, not of fear, but of something bigger. Something that told him this was a crossroads moment. And he knew exactly what his answer was going to be. Jaden barely had time to process what was happening before he found himself being led through the grand hallways of Montgomery Enterprises. Every step felt surreal. The polished marble floors, the massive glass windows reflecting the city skyline, the sleek modern architecture that screamed wealth and power. He had never imagined being in a place like this, let alone as someone being introduced to the world. As they reached the main conference room, the sound of chatter and clicking cameras grew louder. Jaden's pulse quickened. He had seen press conferences on TV before, where billionaires and celebrities stood behind podiums, addressing the world with effortless confidence. Now, he was about to step onto that very stage. Sophia turned to him before they entered. "Just be yourself, Jaden. You don't have to say anything you don't want to. Just know that people are going to see you for what you really are. A hero." Jaden swallowed hard and nodded, even though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. The doors opened, and suddenly, he was hit with a blinding wall of camera flashes. The conference room was packed. Reporters from major news stations, photographers, and influential figures from across the city. At the center of it all was a long, pristine table with microphones lined up. The Montgomery logo gleamed on a massive screen behind it. As Jaden took his seat beside Sophia and Nathan, whispers filled the air. He could hear snippets of conversations. "Who is he?" "That's the kid who saved their daughter." "I heard he was homeless." A microphone was placed in front of him, and before he could even think, Sophia was already addressing the room. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today," she began, her voice commanding yet warm. "Today, we are proud to introduce someone who has reminded us all of the power of courage and selflessness, someone who didn't wait for recognition, didn't act out of self-interest, but simply did what was right in a moment of crisis." She turned to Jaden, smiling. "This is Jaden Carter, the young man who saved my daughter's life." The room erupted into murmurs and flashes. Jaden tensed, feeling like 1,000 eyes were on him, waiting for him to do or say something profound. Sophia continued. "Jaden's bravery and heart are exactly the kind of qualities that the world needs more of. And as a company, as a family, we want to support that. Which is why today we are officially welcoming Jaden into Montgomery Enterprises." Gasps filled the room. Reporters scrambled to get their questions out. "Jaden, how does it feel to be honored like this? Did you ever expect this kind of recognition? What's your story? Where did you come from?" Jaden felt his throat dry up. He had never spoken in front of this many people before, let alone cameras that were broadcasting his face to the entire country. His hands clenched the edge of the table as he fought the urge to retreat. Then, he remembered something. He had been invisible his entire life. Just another kid in the background, another face in the crowd. But now, they were listening. They wanted to hear him. So, he took a breath. He stopped, cleared his throat, and tried again. "I didn't do what I did to get anything out of it. I saw someone who needed help and I helped. That's all." The room fell completely silent, every ear hanging onto his words. Jaden hesitated before continuing. "I know what it's like to feel alone, to feel like no one's coming to save you. And I guess in that moment, I just knew I couldn't let that baby feel that way, even for a second." There was a pause, then a slow wave of applause began to ripple through the room. Sophia smiled proudly. "That's exactly why we believe in Jaden. He represents something bigger than just this moment. He represents what it means to take action when it matters most." The applause grew louder, and before Jaden knew it, the crowd was on its feet. He wasn't just a nameless kid anymore. He was someone worth listening to, someone people believed in. And for the first time in his life, Jaden believed in himself too. The transformation in Jaden's life was nothing short of extraordinary. In the weeks following his viral moment, he found himself navigating a world he never thought he'd be a part of. Once just a boy struggling to make ends meet, he was now rubbing shoulders with some of the most powerful figures in the city. But rather than being overwhelmed, Jaden embraced the opportunity with the same resilience and determination that had led him to that life-changing moment in the first place. Under Sophia and Nathan Montgomery's guidance, Jaden was introduced to the inner workings of Montgomery Enterprises. He sat in on meetings, observed business negotiations, and learned how philanthropy played a role in corporate leadership. But it wasn't the wealth or the luxury that intrigued him. It was the impact. He saw firsthand how resources, influence, and leadership could be used to change lives, and he knew he wanted to be a part of something bigger. Soon, Jaden found himself at events, not just as a guest, but as a speaker. The first time he stood in front of an audience, he felt that familiar nervousness creep in. But as he looked out at the sea of young faces staring up at him, kids who came from backgrounds like his, kids who needed hope, he knew exactly what he needed to say. "I know what it's like to feel like the world is against you," he began, his voice steady. "I know what it's like to feel invisible, like no one sees you, like no one cares. But I'm here to tell you that's not true. You matter. Your dreams matter. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment to change everything." The crowd listened in silence, hanging on to his every word. He wasn't just another success story. He was living proof that no matter where you came from, no matter how many obstacles stood in your way, you could rise above them. Over time, Jaden used his new platform to advocate for youth empowerment and homelessness. He helped launch initiatives to provide shelter, education, and job opportunities for struggling teens. He worked with local organizations to create mentorship programs, making sure that kids like him had the support they needed. One evening, as he stood at a charity event hosted by the Montgomery family, he looked around at the people he was now surrounded by: leaders, changemakers, visionaries. But it was the young kids in the crowd who mattered most to him. He saw the hope in their eyes, the belief that, if he could do it, maybe they could too. And in that moment, Jaden knew his life would never be the same. Because saving that baby hadn't just changed his fate. It had given him a purpose, and he was ready to use it to change the world. The soft hum of the Montgomery Enterprises building echoed through the grand hallways, a stark contrast to the chaotic streets Jaden once called home. Dressed in a crisp navy blue suit, he walked with confidence, a sense of belonging in every step. The once hesitant teen who had saved a life on impulse was now a leader in his own right, shaping the future for countless others. Inside the company's newly launched charity wing, Jaden oversaw a project that had become his passion, an initiative aimed at providing housing, education, and mentorship for underprivileged youth. His own journey from struggle to success fueled his dedication, ensuring that no child would ever feel as alone as he once did. As he moved through the office, employees greeted him with respect, inspired by the young man who had turned adversity into opportunity. From a large window on the upper floor, Sophia and Nathan Montgomery watched him, their hearts filled with pride. Nathan, usually a man of few words, turned to his wife with a small smile. "He's going to change the world," he said, admiration in his voice. Sophia nodded, her eyes never leaving Jaden. "He already has." Down below, Jaden paused for a moment, looking out at the city skyline. This world, once so distant and unreachable, was now his playground. But more importantly, it was his responsibility. He had the power to uplift those who had been overlooked, to ensure that the next generation didn't have to fight as hard as he did to be seen. He adjusted his suit, took a deep breath, and smiled. The weight of his past no longer felt like a burden. It was the foundation on which he would build his future. "The future is now, and it's mine to build," Jaden murmured, determination glowing in his eyes. As the screen faded to black, his silhouette stood tall against the backdrop of possibility, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the undeniable truth that one moment, one act of courage, can change everything.